9 experienced hikers walked into the Ural Mountains in February 1959. Not a single one walked out. When search teams finally found them, the scene made no sense. A tent slashed open from the inside. Bodies scattered across the frozen landscape, some barefoot, some half-dressed, one missing her tongue. And to this day, 67 years later, nobody can fully explain what happened on that mountain. This is the Dyatlov Pass incident. Let me introduce you to these people, because they deserve more than being reduced to a mystery. They were real. Igor Dyatlov was 23 years old. Engineering student. The kind of guy who organized everything, the trip leader, the one everyone trusted to get them through. He'd done expeditions like this before. This wasn't some group of amateurs stumbling into the wilderness on a dare. There were 10 of them originally. Yuri Yudin turned back early because of joint pain, which is the kind of decision that sounds small but ended up saving his life. He spent the rest of his days haunted by the fact that he survived by accident. The remaining 9 pushed on toward Otorten, a peak in the northern Urals. The route was classified as Category 3, the most difficult, but again, these were trained, experienced hikers. They had proper gear. They had a plan. They knew exactly what they were doing. On February 1st, they set up camp on the slope of Kholat Syakhl. And here is a detail that I think gets overlooked. The name Kholat Syakhl comes from the indigenous Mansi language. It translates to Dead Mountain. Now, I'm not a superstitious person, but if I'm picking a campsite, maybe I skip the one literally named after death. That night, something happened. And whatever it was terrifying enough to make 9 rational, trained people do the most irrational thing imaginable. When the group didn't check in on schedule, nobody panicked right away. Delays happen in the backcountry. But days turned into a week, and on February 26th, search teams found their tent on the mountainside. And this is where the story goes from concerning to deeply, deeply wrong. The tent had been cut open from the inside. Not unzipped. Not pulled apart. Someone took a knife and slashed through the fabric, desperately, from within. And then, based on the footprints in the snow, the entire group ran out into the freezing darkness. Temperatures that night were around -30 Celsius. That is -22 Fahrenheit. And several of them were barefoot. Some were in their underwear. One had a single sock. Think about that for a second. You're an experienced mountaineer. You know that going outside without gear in those temperatures is a death sentence. You know it in your bones. And yet something inside the tent was so frightening that the cold, the guaranteed, lethal cold, was the better option. The footprints led downhill, about 1.5 miles toward a cedar tree at the edge of the forest. The first 2 bodies, Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Kribanaskenko, were found at the base of that cedar, next to the remains of a small fire. They were in their underwear. The branches of the cedar were broken up to about 15 feet, which means someone had climbed it. Looking for something? Or looking at something? 3 more bodies, Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin, were found between the tent and the cedar, scattered at different distances. Their positions suggested they were trying to crawl back to the tent. Slobodin had a skull fracture, but it wasn't what killed him. The cold got him first. The last 4 weren't found until May, buried under 12 feet of snow in a ravine. And this is where the case crossed from strange into something else entirely. Okay, before I tell you what they found in that ravine, and trust me, this is the part that changes everything. If you're the kind of person who stays up way too late going down rabbit holes like this, you're going to want to subscribe to Mind Trap. We cover the strangest unsolved cases that most channels won't touch. Hit subscribe, tap the bell, and let's keep going. Because it gets worse. The 4 bodies found in the ravine had injuries that were, in the words of the medical examiner, comparable to being hit by a car. Ludmila Dubinina had massive chest trauma, multiple broken ribs driven inward with a force that Dr. Boris Vozrozdeny said could not have been caused by a human. And she was missing her tongue, her eyes, and part of her lips. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had a crushed skull. Alexander Kolevatov and Semyon Zolotaryov had similar severe chest injuries. These were not injuries from a fall. These were not injuries from a fight. The examiner specifically noted there were no external wounds consistent with the internal damage. The force came from something, but there were no bruises, no impact marks on the skin that matched. Now here is something most videos about this case skip over entirely. Some of the clothing found on the RAVINE group tested positive for radioactive contamination. Not extreme levels, but measurably above normal. 2 garments in particular showed beta radiation. The Soviet investigators noted it, documented it, and then basically moved on without explanation. And one more detail that tends to get buried. Several witnesses in nearby settlements, both Mansi indigenous people and other travelers, reported seeing strange orange spheres in the sky over the area during January and February of 1959. These reports were documented in the investigation file. The Soviet military acknowledged them. They were never explained. So, what happened? Let me walk you through the major theories, including a couple that most people have never heard. The avalanche theory. This is the one the Russian government officially endorsed in 2020 when they reopened and reclosed the case. The idea is that a small slab avalanche hit the tent, causing the chest injuries, and the group panicked and fled. It is tidy. It is plausible on the surface. But it has serious problems. The slope angle where they camped was not steep enough for a typical slab avalanche. Their footprints leading away were orderly, not the chaotic scramble you'd expect from people just hit by a wall of snow. The tent was damaged but not buried or swept away. And it does not explain the radioactivity. It does not explain the missing soft tissue. It does not explain the lights in the sky. Infrasound. This one is genuinely interesting. In certain wind conditions, air flowing over the dome-shaped terrain of Kholat Syakhl could generate infrasound sound waves below the range of human hearing. Infrasound has been documented to cause feelings of intense dread, panic, disorientation, and even visual disturbances in laboratory settings. The theory goes that a freak wind event generated infrasound strong enough to trigger a mass